Good morning and welcome to COBRA this morning. We've got a very exciting webinar. Guys from FleetElite are here. COBRA, as you know, is a pro bono initiative for businesses in financial distress. We are providing free legal advice, free turnaround advice, free business rescue advice to all those that come into the COBRA ecosystem. It's a collaboration between Schindler's Attorneys, IQ Business, and Engaged Business Turnaround. Today, we welcome Warren Fraser, Richard Scott Martin, and Mohammed Saida from FleetElite. Mohammed, I think we're going to start with you. Mohammed has an impressive CV. He's been around in the industry for a very long time. He's going to present. He's going to be the first of the presenters. Then we'll be followed by Richard and then Warren. Basically, how do you leverage your assets? How do you leverage your assets from your balance sheet during a crisis? So, Mohammed, can we go over to you to start the presentation?
Thank you so much. Can you guys hear me clearly? Excellent.
We can.
So, good morning to the listeners. I'd like to firstly thank the organizers of the COBRA initiative. And I think that's firstly for putting together this wonderful initiative. And then secondly, for enabling dealers online to partake. So my name is Mohammed Saida, as mentioned, and I head up the FleetElite, which is the corporate division of Dealers Online. Dealers Online is primarily a provider of solutions to the motor industry. And we are the leaders in online vehicle auctions. But I think for now, enough about Dealers Online. I'll leave that to my colleague Richard to chat about. With over 80% of the global economy having experienced some form of lockdown, and in light of the current risk-based approach that we're experiencing, I thought it's imperative that I spend a few minutes talking about South Africa's automotive sector, and the significance of the industry on the country as a whole. So as with all industries, the automotive sector has been hard hit, and that's primarily in the manufacturing arm, which impacts the country's GDP the most. So I'm going to run through a few interesting facts around the industry. South Africa is the only country on the African continent that hosts 7 major auto manufacturers. The likes of Toyota, VW, Nissan, BMW and Daimler all produce many models within our borders. Then the automotive industry contributes some 6.9% to the country's GDP. That's made up by 4.4% manufacturing and an additional 2.5% in retail. The automotive industry is the largest manufacturing sector within the country's economy. And then the total automotive revenue in South Africa amounted to just over $500 billion in 2018, which is an exorbitant figure. It's massive. Furthermore, South Africa is an export-oriented industry and has exported some 64% of light vehicle production in 2019. We hit a bit of a record within 2019 where we had a total of 387,000 vehicles exported, and that was to 151 international markets. So the automotive industry is the country's 5th largest exporting sector out of 104 sectors. And the manufacturing segment of the industry presently employs more than 112,000 people. And combined with the industry's strong multiplier effect, the industry is responsible for approximately 450,000 jobs across the South African economy. So this is not a small industry. It's not to be taken lightly. I think, ladies and gentlemen, based on these factors, it is clearly evident that the sector is of paramount importance to the well-being of the country. Now, as the country moved into lockdown, there were quite a few growing concerns that some international export markets would perhaps procure their vehicles from other regions, which would affect us in the long run. But I think as this pandemic affected almost every country, those concerns were actually weakened because everyone went into some sort of lockdown or the other. Now, as we speak, production is up and running, but we'll surely find a decline in demand, and that's post-COVID-19. And it's really as big ticket items are not top of mind for struggling consumers around the world. Moody's have predicted that global demand for passenger vehicles will actually shrink by about 14% in 2020. Now, listeners, that equates to roughly 13.5 million vehicles. So it is a massive decline, something that the industry is not, any industry is not happy with. But for now, I'd like to briefly touch on some interesting topics, and those are surrounding the automotive industry. And if I may term it automotive insights. So vehicle values. Now, if we look at the retail sector locally, we'll surely find a reduced demand for new cars, and that will really come based on the weaker rand as well as the Moody's downgrade, which will push car prices up. Then this will result in consumers opting for used vehicles. So obviously, if new vehicle prices are way too high, consumers are going to move over onto used vehicles. And historically, South Africa has always suffered from an imbalance in the demand for and the supply of used vehicles. The supply has always been much higher. Now, this results in decline in values due to oversupply. So we are hopeful that the increased demand for used vehicles will at least provide a bit of a gradual stabilization of those values. Furthermore, I want to quickly chat about digitization in the industry. Motor car dealers have been hit very hard by this lockdown, and that was primarily due to the fact that businesses were not completely shut down. Were completely shut down, as they did not have any plans to work remotely. These plans were not put in place in the past. Motor car dealers didn't have a need to work remotely, and that's why they were impacted so badly. Now, historically, also the industry had not paid much attention to digitization, and I think the pandemic has actually gone ahead and it certainly resulted in the topic being discussed in boardrooms all over the country. Dealer principals are currently looking for new and innovative ways to serve their customers, and that's without being face-to-face. Then just a bit on the economic activity. So there is some good news. Activity in the market is on the rise. We found some stats from financial institutions show that the number of finance applications recorded on a day-to-day basis late last week actually reached the highs that they were during the peak period in the month of March. So there's definitely some positive light there. And if we look at the banks, obviously they would be more picky in these times, when it comes to approvals of vehicle finance. What we've seen is that the banks have dropped their approval ratings by about 7%. So it's moved down from 27% to around 20% at the moment. However, I think one strong trend is that of cash purchases on smaller, less costly vehicles. So we're finding a lot of that at the moment. Very lastly, one of the topics I want to quickly touch on is the South African petrol head, myself included. So the South African petrol head has always been known for the ownership mentality, where we want to buy and own the cars that we love. Now, the trend in many developed countries has seen consumers moving towards the utilization mentality, where cars are leased or rented and not necessarily owned for the period. So if we look at the UK, we look at 80 to 90% of vehicles are leased, whereas South Africa is actually the opposite. We only find 10 to 20% of those vehicles are actually leased or rented. So has this pandemic changed the way that consumers buy, or will it change it? Will we be more risk averse in the future? Will we opt for less risky lease options? Will South Africans move more into the utilization model as opposed to ownership? And will the car market as we know it be toppled on its head? I think, listeners, only the future will tell. So over the next few weeks, I'd like to chat about a few interesting topics that will aid you in making informed decisions regarding your fleets. I think top of mind is the repossession process and the do's and don'ts around that process, the methods of benefiting most out of that process, as well as trade, retail, and residual values. I think it is important for everyone to have an understanding around these to maximize what you have in your fleets. And finally, the importance of fleet inspections. Thank you so much. That's it from me, and I'll now hand over to Richard.
Mohammed, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm just going to get my video started there. Yeah, a big thank you to COBRA for inviting us and for organizing this very impressive initiative. And yeah, thank you, Mo, for that context and introduction to the automotive industry. I feel like I've been living life through a digital screen, and my physical environment hasn't changed at all. It's quite perplexing. And I think we're all feeling and are ready for some sort of change. With the automotive industry, there's a number of different interdependencies and various different role players, which make it quite complex and quite difficult to understand. We're in quite a unique position with Dealers Online because we engage with various different sectors. But to start off, I'd like to just share maybe a fairly inspirational story just to get started on an optimistic note, and that's the story of Play-Doh. And there are a number of similarities to the situation we're in now. Initially, it had a 20-year career as a wallpaper cleaner in the days when coal was primary fuel in the home. And using coal used to turn the actual wallpaper sooty. And Play-Doh was initially used as to remove soot. But then post-World War II, when they moved away from coal to natural gas, there was no market for the wallpaper cleaning putty anymore. And it was initially developed by Cleo McVicker, but his sister-in-law had been using it in her primary school teaching classes, and she convinced him to investigate it as a child toy. It was non-toxic, was fun, it lasted a while if it was sealed, and they managed to get a prime placement on a children's show, and later went from being a wall cleaning putty to something that's become iconic in many of our hearts and minds. So I think it just shows when there are constraints and creativity that and suddenly just no demand, we can think quick and rethink about what it is that we do as businesses. So I think to start off just with some background and context to Dealers Online, it initially started out as a used car salesman in the back of Sandown Motors in 2007, looking to deal with his own remarketing and disposal channels. And since then, we've fought for fairer markets by enabling equal access to information with trust-creating technologies. Initially, how it was done then, if you had a trade-in, you'd go into a dealership and they would do a valuation of sorts, but it would be based on gut feel and their own experience. And they would phone their mates if they didn't want to actually retail that stock, to be able to get rid of it. But then quickly realizing there's only so many cups of coffee you can have in a day, William Miller, who founded the business, realized that there was an opportunity to create an online auction marketplace to be able to facilitate, the flow of unwanted trade-ins where dealers could actually trade the stock through an online portal rather than the typical phone a friend, which was very relationship dependent. So today it's evolved quite substantially. The marketplace has grown considerably, and we leverage our core capabilities to tackle problems for South Africa's tier one financial institutions, automotive OEMs, and dealership groups. So there are many different characters in the automotive industry, and this is where the complexity comes in. There's banks and financial institutions. There's end users like you and me, dealers, dealership groups, the OEMs. There's fleet management companies, and they all contribute in various different ways to this ecosystem. And that's a lot of the time where complexity comes in, is if we're just end users or just fleet operators, not necessarily understanding the full context and picture. So today, I'd like to share some of our journey and some of our insights into our understanding of the automotive industry and apply it to the situation we're in now. And hopefully there's some useful information to help you enable yourself to be able to make better business decisions moving forward. So I think we're very fortunate because we have exposure to the length and breadth, and we're privy to all sorts of insightful conversations at various different levels. So WesBank and Standard Bank are two of our biggest clients. We also have clients in Pick and Pay, and checkers, who are very big, corporate fleet operators. It's allowed us to get us a kind of bird's eye view and see patterns emerging in industries, and these are observations and insights that form a lot of our innovation efforts and have informed a lot of the development. So we would like to pride ourselves on innovation being our core capability, and there's a number of different solutions and problems that we've evolved to solve over the last 12 years. And so our positioning is very much as what we call digital first channel partners. So we have a core suite of technology products. We have a whole host of different managed and owned marketplaces. And then we have the physical infrastructure and support services. And it's on those three pillars that we're able to enable digital first sales and distribution and disposal channels for our clients. It's very important, I think, with business these days to be clear and to have a purpose-driven organization. And it's something that we went through an exercise with recently. And it's to fight for fairer markets by innovating, trust-creating technologies. I think the automotive industry is notoriously opaque, and as I mentioned earlier, it's quite complex. But our ability to be able to innovate trust-creating technologies that allow transparency, complete transparency, we believe helps form fairer markets, and fairer markets ultimately are more valuable for both buyers and sellers. There's a bit of a universe and that I need to explain because Dealers Online, FleetElite, you've heard. But FleetElite is a specialist division designed to service the corporate and OEM fleet operators. We have another business, Dealers IQ, which service the dealerships and dealership groups. We've got Master Ops, which is a specialist support team, and then a 20-person strong development team in Somerset West called Code Clear that lead our development and innovation efforts. And lastly, we have a business unit called Trucks IQ, which specializes in servicing the heavy commercial vehicle sector. It kind of looks a bit like this, but as I mentioned, we're digital first channel partners to various different segments of the automotive value chain. Some of our clients include Checkers, Clicks, Pick n Pay, Vodacom, Avis, banks, Standard Bank and WesBank are our two big ones, but as well as other financial services of the automotive industry. And anyway, I would like to share some lessons and insights just from my experience so far. So we sold over 250,000 vehicles, and specifically over the last 6 years, we've helped digitize disposal processes for the likes of WesBank, Standard Bank, Equestra, as well as Pick n Pay and Vodacom, who are prominent fleet owners. The biggest challenge that they all face, irrespective of the size of their fleet, is the decisions they had to make when and how to sell their vehicles in order to be able to achieve better business outcomes. There are a number of best practices that we'd like to share today. I think quite simply, we know that marketing matters. So the more eyes that are on your asset at that point of disposal, the better. We know that, as we've proven, that online auction is one of the most effective mechanisms because bidders can bid from anywhere. We have a buyer base of over 7,000 professionally educated buyers inside of Dealers Online. And it ensures that vehicles fetch the absolute highest price. Method also matters, and that's because digital processes can be automated, and that means we can turn metal into cash faster than anyone else and minimize holding costs and reduce any working capitals tied up in a disposal process. I think there's a couple of traps that happen. We know visibility is absolutely key. Corruption and collusion are big concerns in the automotive industry, specifically when we're looking at the trade of used vehicles. So digital technologies help us minimize corruption, and it is notoriously rife inside of the automotive industry. It's something that we've set out as a purpose to fix. Speed is absolutely key. Manual, siloed process, paper-based. The longer the asset sits there, the more it costs you. So that asset not generating value, it's actually costing you in depreciation and in holding costs. So anything like keys, missing paperwork, the slow admin process, they all eventually add up. The management of that vehicle throughout its life cycle also matters a huge amount. Minimizing reconditioning costs is absolutely vital to being able to achieve the highest possible price when disposing of your asset. Previously, online auctions were quite difficult to sell used vehicles. every new car is the same, but each used car is unique. It has its own DNA, and older vehicles, were quite difficult to sell online. Buyers wanted to be able to see and touch the vehicle, and it's changed a lot. There have been drastic improvements in technology. There's increased connectivity, standardized inspection reporting, as well as improved vehicle imaging, have all contributed towards a greater climate of buyer confidence. And now, over the last 12 years, buyers, used car vehicle buyers have become accustomed to actually buying online. So vehicles that maybe struggled in the past to sell online are now gaining a lot more traction. I think remarketing is essentially important for any business to consider. It's often used interchangeably with disposal sell. Essentially, a vehicle gets to the end of its useful life, and something has to happen to it. And the decisions you make around there can have a huge range of different outcomes. So we've designed a number of different solutions and digital processes that allow a vehicle to take its optimal path in order to be able to achieve the best possible outcome. Essentially, when it comes down to choosing, what should I sell and to whom, there are two markets that a used vehicle can effectively be sold into. It's either retail or wholesale. In the wholesale market, the wholesale buyers include auctioneers, wholesalers, traders, dealers. They buy the vehicles ultimately to resell them for a profit, while retail customers buy the vehicles to drive them. So the difference is absolutely key in understanding the motivations as to why your buyer is buying that vehicle. So essentially, when you're looking at the major drawback of selling to a middleman, so to speak, is that they're always going to try and minimize that price because they're only buying it really to make a profit. So if we look at our disposal process, there's two different ways it can go: wholesale to the trade or retail to the auction. Retail to an end user. The thing with buying a car, it's exceptionally complicated because you're not just buying a vehicle. There's finance attached to it. There's often vehicle being purchased, traded in. There's insurance and other value-added products, like warranties, protection plans. So typically the buying process is exceptionally long and complex, and that can be exceptionally costly for businesses. So there are a number of scenarios that we found where businesses might want to find themselves selling their vehicles to their staff members when they reach the end of their useful life or lease term. But businesses aren't really set up to sell cars. It's just not something that they're designed to do. So the complexities that arise in relation to inspection, valuation, financing often result in heavy, time-consuming processes, exacerbated often by the size and the level of bureaucracy within inside the organization. It often just means essentially that vehicles are sitting unused and not generating value on someone's balance sheet. So there's the opportunity cost of that free cash flow stuck in non-generating, value-generating assets. So in certain circumstances, it makes sense to be able to retail a vehicle, and often this means that you're able to achieve a much higher in price. And removes the need for a middleman. So we find that sometimes it is a win-win situation because as an employer, you can dispose of your vehicles faster, often at a higher price and without the cost of transport, auction fees and recons. And your employees also gain a well-maintained vehicle at a fair price. So we've designed a solution with employee and driver sales where we allow employees, we customize specific sales programs to meet your desired outcomes. We work with you to establish the guidelines and policies, and then we also take care of the entire administrative process, including everything from the inspection, valuation, marketing, financing. Everything is digital, everything is automated, and we can take a process that would typically take weeks, into a couple of days to complete. And that's ultimately why we bring the bank and the dealer to our clients. It just ensures that we're able to speed up the process to a point where it literally takes a couple of days. I think something that is very important to us is data. There are theoretical values like the M&M code, which are a guide or a marker to look at, but there is no one source of the truth. It's a piece of the puzzle. To get to true market value, you have to kind of be able to assemble a variety of different types of data. over the last 12 years, selling 250,000 vehicles, there's a number of different transactions that occurred there. We've been able to build up a rich real-world transactional behavioral data, which gives us an unmatched price intelligence. We also have integrations into the likes of Gumtree, AutoTrader, Ceriti, other F&I platforms, TransUnion, as well as Deep Blue Group sales data. So we're able to give our clients an absolute unmatched pricing intelligence and market insight. This is something that we're very proud of as a level 1 BE contributor. So it definitely does help to spend with us. And then if we look at a case study, WesBank, we're disposing of between 200 and 500 vehicles a month, and it's an absolute headache. It is obviously one of the most prominent fleet owners, but their vehicles were tied in with their repossessed vehicles. So on average, benchmarked against their previous disposal method, we achieved a 12% higher average selling price. We reduced their disposal time from 46 days to 6 days. And in the shortening of that disposal process, we increased speed. Meant there was less free cash flow stuck in the stock, and we reduced working capital by 300%. And our turnkey solution has become so ingrained in the offering that their clients only ask for their fleet vehicles to be disposed and managed entirely by dealers online. I think from my side, that's all. I'm just going to hand over to Warren. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Before you start, let's just give a brief CV. You've been around quite a bit. Tell us a bit about what kind of things you've done in the past and what's led to you coming on board at FleetElite.
Thank you, Gary. I appreciate the time, and thank you to COBRA, the team at COBRA, and greetings to all our participants this morning. Where I come from, I'm really a serial entrepreneur. I've been around the block a few times. I cut my teeth early as a restaurateur, and from there I've moved on to various industries. I've always been a hands-on kind of person, and very much in the digital space as well. So I've already been very IT orientated, and I love business. I love how business works, and I love how to digitize business. And through all my quest, I eventually met up with William Miller, loved what he did, and he asked me to join the team. I was very happy to do so, and that brings me to where we are today. I'm going to dive into my presentation, but I'd just like to touch on what we're speaking today on how to leverage your assets in your balance sheet.
I mean, just tell us from a point of view of COBRA, Warren.
Yes.
How those that are interested in getting involved with the COBRA project, how leveraging of assets within the balance sheets and the work that you guys do can assist before you start with your presentation.
Well, I think that's exactly what the topic of my discussion is today. As Mohammed gave us a brief overview of what the industry is doing, Richard spoke about how we do it and the technologies that we use. And I'm really, my topic today is how to actually make that work for our panelists. We will actually come in and we diagnose your fleet, help you to understand your fleet, and then help you realize the cash flow opportunities that can be realized from that diagnosis. So yeah, and that's really what I'm covering in the presentation today. So if you're happy, I can jump into that.
Go ahead, please. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Gary. I'm going to share my screen. Let's have a look. Can everyone see my screen? Is everything okay?
All good, Warren. Please go ahead.
Okay, good. I'm sorry, I just lost my screen there for a second. I'm trying to get it back. All right. Thank you. Thank you, team, and hello, everyone. We're proud to be part of the COBRA initiative in keeping businesses out of business rescue. Our topic this morning is leveraging the assets in your balance sheet to raise capital in times of crisis. My goal today is that we can hopefully play a small part to assist shaping your thinking around your company's fleet and to assist companies really in it's trying to stay out of business rescue. As a low-hanging cash flow opportunity is usually found in a company's fleet, and in a crisis, the knee-jerk reaction is to sell vehicle assets as fast as possible. We have seen the tendency to sell vehicle assets as it is a low-hanging fruit. It is true that a vehicle fleet may realize much-needed bridging during this time. However, before reaching the decision to sell, it is important that you act from a point of strength rather than a position of desperation. The decisions you make now not only need to work right now for you, but also carry you well into the future. We all know that knowledge is power, and before reaching the decision to sell your assets, you should equip yourself with this knowledge. Over the last 12 years, we've been assisting our clients in answering these difficult questions. It is important for a fleet owner to understand this before reaching a decision to sell. If the decision equates to selling, it should be an informed one, and it is imperative that the returns are maximized. It is true that you need to buy right in order to sell right, but the converse is also true. You need to sell right in order to buy right. We have sold over 250,000 vehicles and performed over 1 million vehicle valuations. And in doing so, we have solved many problems for many companies at every level. We've amassed an unmatched amount of data, and we can draw deep industry insights from them. We've made it our business to understand the automotive industry, and we can do so as we are privy to industry insights at the very highest level from South Africa's automotive leaders. We have a bird's eye view of what the market is going to do and what it may do next. We can therefore leverage off this and our experience in the advice we offer to our fleet operators. To kick off, really, we begin our fleet restructuring journey through consultation with a high-level valuation of the company's vehicle assets. This is where we look at factors such as estimated second-hand value. This is a high-level snapshot potential of value, as no two second-hand vehicles are the same, and I'll extrapolate on this a bit later on in the presentation. For the second-hand market value, we reference value against official trade and retail. Sorry, Gary, is everything okay there? It's saying my screen is paused.
There we go, that's better.
Is that back on?
Yeah.
Back on. All fine. Go
Sorry,
ahead.
I'm not sure what happened there. As long as you guys can see my screen, everything's happening.
Yeah. Go ahead.
All right. Okay, so I'm going to just start over on the slide. We begin our fleet restructuring journey through the consultation with a high-level valuation of vehicle assets. And this is a high-level value. So we want to look at, really take a snapshot of your fleet. This is where we look at the second-hand market value. We reference value against official trade and retail figures provided by bureaus such as TransUnion and various motoring platforms, as well as our own sales data and systems. For those in the audience who are not familiar with trade and retail, it's simply this. Trade is the estimated value you could potentially sell your vehicle to a used car dealer for, and retail is what an end user may be willing to pay for the vehicle in a showroom condition when buying from a dealer. We'll then look at your settlement value, what is still owing to the bank, the term of your loan, residual values, and balloon payments if they are attached to those loans. We'll then consider the usefulness of the company. How crucial is this asset to your operation? Can you do without it? Is the asset sweating? In other words, is it yielding a profit for your organization? Based on this high-level data, we can then consider our options and what could be done next. It's one thing to sell all your assets, but you still need to be in a position to operate. So we'd look at what vehicles we could earmark that should stay in service. Typically, these vehicles will not yield a desired return at present. These are factors that affect the disposal values right now, and perhaps they will achieve a better value for you in the future. We'll then also identify vehicles that could potentially be sold at the moment, and those vehicles that are sold, what the company can afford to replace missing vehicles with. You just cannot do without them. Excuse me. Can the business, we'd look at the factors such as, can the business afford an FML option, which is a full maintenance leasing option? This is really where you dispose your entire fleet and you replace it with an FML option. That is one way of raising cash flow, and if you can afford that option, we'll definitely work very closely with the banks, and we can steer you in the right direction with that regard. Depending on where you're at with your business cash flow and how distressed you are at this stage, we could consider outsourcing options such as courier, third-party owner-driver operations could work for the time being. Then also just to help a company owner shape their thinking around bootstrapping strategies. Perhaps vehicle sharing plan amongst departments could work. As an example, you could have your technicians share their company-owned vehicles with the delivery drivers when not seeing clients. So at this point, a fleet owner, we hope to leave a fleet owner with a high-level overview of the potential value and solutions that can be accomplished through a fleet restructure. As mentioned, this would be a very high-level overview, a snapshot of the vehicle potential, and this will equip you in the decisions you make next. I've called this slide pricing your product. Should your decision be to sell, we then want to move over to pricing your product. And I like to use the example of a restaurant owner. You'd never place an item on your menu that you've incorrectly described and incorrectly priced. Why would you want to do that when you're remarketing your vehicles? Earlier on, I touched on the fact that no two second-hand vehicles are the same. When assuming value of a second-hand vehicle, you need to understand the factors that differentiate identical vehicle models from one another. Factors such as tyre wear, service history, the way it has been cared for, the mileage being appropriate to the age of the vehicle, warranties, maintenance plans, and the overall condition of the vehicle. There are so many factors that differentiate these vehicles, which ultimately decides the price that the vehicle would fetch in the market. A simple missing key could set you back thousands. It's imperative that a fleet owner has the full picture of what the market is prepared to pay for these assets and the condition they are in before deciding to sell a vehicle. A fleet owner would be going in blind without this knowledge, resulting in frustrations, delays, and ultimately affecting his bottom line result. If the goal is to raise capital during this time, it should be maximized, and you need to expedite the process. Listing a vehicle on a classified retail site at the wrong price without a detailed condition report will not yield an effective result, if any at all. It will frustrate your efforts and you'll be doing yourself a disservice. We perform what we call a detailed valuation on each asset. We identify the condition of the vehicle and we assign a cost to the repairs of that vehicle. This is what we call a make good cost. Defined further is what a buyer would have to spend on that vehicle to get it back to a marketable condition. With this additional data, we'd now be able to mine our sales database and offer a more accurate value on the vehicle based on the condition it is in. You have to consider how important this is in achieving the best price in the shortest time possible. If you do not know at the time of going to market, you've effectively described and priced your product incorrectly. You would not do this with your traditional products or services that you trade in. Why would you? The same principles will apply when deciding to sell your assets. Know your product and sell it correctly. As a fleet owner, you now have a dashboard of your asset value that you can make informed decisions from and effectively maximize your fleet restructure. And if the goal is to raise finance, you have to have all the data at your disposal to make the right decisions. You can now leverage the assets in your balance sheet to raise capital through products such as business refinance or asset disposal. Accurately knowing the condition and value can reveal an opportunity for an organization to access solutions with asset refinance. This can be useful on loans and that can be activated at a fixed interest rate. For instance, if you had a loan that you initiated in the past at a fixed interest rate, you can now refinance that loan and take advantage of the low interest rates. If there is also sufficient equity in that vehicle, you can access this cash to either repair vehicles that may be damaged, mainly tires, or you could utilize the cash in your business. Another option is what we call asset disposal. All this means to you really is selling your vehicle for the most and as fast and as efficiently as possible. We currently sell 5,500 vehicles per month with 53 versions of our online platform, and we achieve significantly higher returns for our clients. We have reliably sold vehicles to automotive trade for the past 12 years using online platforms. We've become the platform of choice for global brand, tier 1 banks, corporates like Ford, Jaguar Land Rover, TransUnion, Barloworld, and WesBank. We are now applying the underlying technologies and methodologies to auctioning of equipment from the mining and agricultural industries. We sell vehicles to a database of 8,000 vehicle dealers on our closed auction platform. These used car dealers are accustomed to buying vehicles online and is their preferred method of securing stock, as they can accurately rely on condition reports and the cost involved in getting those vehicles to a marketable state. Auction.co.za is our public platform where the general public can participate in auctions. We have seen a drive towards this, specifically where online dealerships are leapfrogging into this space as a result of the COVID-19 impact on the traditional dealerships. Summing up the process, step 1 is we will consult with the fleet owner, we'll perform a high-level valuation and determine the desired outcomes. When we move We then move on to pricing and a detailed valuation, a process where we become intimately involved with the actual condition and market value of your vehicles. This vital information will equip company owners with a roadmap on what to do next. We can then look at outsourced options of vehicles that need to be sold, what vehicles will not yield a desired return at present, factors that affect the disposal values which may not be favorable, which may be more favorable in the future. We'll then know which vehicles will qualify for refinance, and then we'll also know which vehicles are best suited for disposal right now. I hope that I've helped shape the audience thinking around vehicle fleets. We have set up a microsite for anyone wanting to discuss these fleet options with us further. We have some of our services on pro bono, and we have discounted some of our services as well to members of COBRA. I'd like to hand over now to our host for any questions that the panelists may have for us. Over to you, Gary.
Great, thanks Warren. That was very informative, and so too to you, Richard and Mohammed. Thank you very much for your great insights. Warren, your typical guy coming into your company or entity coming into COBRA. Let's reiterate what FleetElite can offer to them.
Okay, so the first thing, thank you, Gary. The first thing we would do is we'd look at the, we'd want to have a chat with the company owner, look what fleets are on his book, consider where he's at, the position, the reason why he's, the reason why he wants to sell his assets. And then we'd look at what assets are optimal for disposal. What are those assets really worth to him? Quite often when someone looks at selling a used vehicle, they go online and they visit various motoring classified sites, and they get an idea of what their vehicles are worth. Unfortunately, those values are actually quite incorrect, as Richard mentioned, and I touched on it as well. There's no two second-hand vehicles are the same. So a company owner would obviously assign a wishful thinking value to his fleet, and then he may proceed with that and eventually get so frustrated, a whole month could go by, and he would then just take the lowest offer from whoever makes him an offer. And that's not an effective way of actually disposing of your vehicles. So I would come in, understand the reason for selling, how dire the situation is, what vehicles you cannot do without, what solutions do we have for vehicles that we do dispose of. Perhaps, like I said, could you use a company sharing, a vehicle sharing policy within your company? Can you use couriers? Whatever the situation is in. We would then, help shape your thinking around those decisions, and then we'll proceed on to making a full valuation of those vehicles where we accurately describe those vehicles. It's like you having a product and you wanted to sell it to the market. You need to know what that product is worth, and you need to describe that product properly in order for your clients to buy. Now, vehicle remarketing is exactly the same. You can't just, like we said, no two vehicles are the same. So you need to know what that vehicle is, and you need to know what it's worth. Once we have that information, we can then say, okay, is there equity in this vehicle? Should we refinance that vehicle? We could raise cash flow for the business from that point of view. Alternatively, is the best decision to sell that vehicle and replace it with FML, example. In that situation, you want to sell those vehicles as quickly and as effectively as possible. And again, knowing your price, knowing your product condition, knowing what you're selling is how you sell an item as quickly and as effectively as possible, and that's where we shine. So we then take that product, we'd move it on to our asset disposal process, and we'd then dispose of that asset as quickly as possible for you, which will hopefully raise cash flow and help a company that's in distress bridge finance during this very difficult period. Gary, I hope that answers.
Great, Warren. Would that perhaps answer the question by Judge Viga Kazlushkini? Excuse for the pronunciation. He asks, he'd like a valuation on his vehicle. Should he contact you privately with regard to that?
So what we've done is we've set up a microsite where you can actually go have a look at our products and services, and you can book consultations with me where I'll be happy to discuss your fleet, understanding your fleet, understanding where you are right now, and help you with achieving those values. There's two parts of our value chain. We do a high level value, which is really what I touched on first, where we reference dates against TransUnion, where Like Richard spoke about, we get data from the Gumtrees, the classified vehicle sites, and we can give you a snapshot overview of that vehicle. And that really just puts you in a position where you can decide on what you're going to do next. And if the decision is then, okay, this batch of vehicles I would like to keep, this batch of vehicles we can't do without, but this batch of vehicles we can get rid of, we can then hold your hand in the next the next part of your journey.
Sure. We've got another question. Either Richard, Mohammed, or Warren could answer this one. At what stage during this time of crisis for a business do you think owners should consider using their vehicles to leverage capital? I don't know, Richard, you want to take this one?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that. I think, I mean, at this point in time, a lot of the time that cash flow can be better deployed towards, operational expenses. But obviously, disposing of that asset shouldn't be to the detriment of your ability to be able to, deliver value to your customers. So it's always important to be able to understand the function, role, and usefulness of the asset in your business and business model. But yeah, I think a lot of the time, as Mo also touched on, is South Africa has this idea of ownership, but often we just need access to mobility. So there might be opportunities for businesses to be able to optimize, the equity that is tied into their assets and redeploy it towards activities that are actually going to help the business survive this period.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. Now we've got one of our partners, the business rescue practitioners, on board with us today, Ian Fleming and Peter Gordon. Ian, from a business rescue point of view, do you want to come in and discuss possible options for those that have entered the COBRA project?
Yes, certainly, Gary. Thanks very much. I'm not putting my video on today, but yeah, thank you very much. And Warren and Richard, it was certainly an extremely interesting presentation that both of you did. And Warren, I must say your platform is very impressive. Achieving 12% higher average selling prices is very remarkable. From a COBRA perspective and from an engaged business turnaround perspective, we do have quite substantial experience in the motor industry, specifically the retail motor industry, and we understand that the industry is really all about gross profit percentages. You are operating in an incredibly fine margin environment, and those people that understand FMCG retail will be used to a 15 to 20% margin. We know that the motor retail industry is substantially lower than that most of the time, and our focus in turnaround and business rescue in the retail motor industry is really about preserving retailer GPs in this environment in light of much lower volumes that are likely to be prevalent within the foreseeable future. So preserving retailer GPs and improving retailer GPs. And Warren and Richard both touched on the focus on achieving highest prices quite extensively, and really that comes down to achieving higher GPs. And our, us as the COBRA team, as the COBRA turnaround team, and the engaged team would really be working with Richard and Warren to place specific focus on preservation and improvement of GPs, and in the light of lower sales in the new car division, which will most definitely be the case for the foreseeable future, the focus inevitably has to move to part sales, the divisions that generate higher GP, such as parts sales, workshop, and finance and insurance, as Richard and Warren have already touched on quite extensively. And then what we've been doing in all industries is the way we've been helping business owners, and the way we could help dealer principals and dealerships is by moving the cost structures which are inevitably quite high, normally high fixed cost structures, towards variable cost structures. And when we talk about variable cost structures, we're talking about linking the cost structure to the turnover of the company, so that we can immediately reduce the cost structure, and then over time, as volumes build up again, the cost structure can increase in line with the increase in turnover and thus gross profit. And what we've been doing with many business owners in the retail space is sitting down and helping them negotiate with landlords, with employees, basically towards moving their cost structures to variable cost structures that are linked to turnover. And the landlords, as we know, have been quite cooperative to date. That we don't know, that might change in the future, but it's a very delicate negotiation process that has to take place. Employees, typically non-sales employees, would be have been very open to discussing wage structures and salary structures, whereby their salaries are quite substantially reduced in many cases, just so that they can effectively be assured of a job at the end of the day. And they've been very cooperative and understanding of that. Yeah, obviously we can assist with finance raising against non-incumbent assets, as Richard and Warren have already pointed out, and the sale of non-generating assets, non-revenue generating assets, in order to raise cash where cash is urgently required. Thanks, Gary.
Do vehicles have a good success rate with regard to turning around, business turnaround? Is it one that you would advise, a particular sector where you think you'll get good results?
Well, yes, Gary. We have had good results, and it really comes down to, in a lower volume environment, as I've already stated, the extent to which we can reduce those fixed cost structures and preserve gross profits at the same time. We, as in all businesses, it's usually a case of the extent to which the business owner works with us. And when we come into an environment like this, we are the first to admit that we do not know everything about it. The owner of the business, the dealer principal, will always know more about us. He'll always have better relationships with his clients. He will always understand. He would have been there for many years in a typical case, and he will always understand his business and his trading environment much better than we can. It's for us to be able to sit with him, hold his hand, guide him through the period of distress, and make interventions where we consider necessary. So, as in any environment, it's the extent to which the owner of the company works with us that determines the success in the end. The ones that don't work are, and I'm not talking about motor industry specifically, but let's talk retail specifically. The ones that don't work are where the business owner sits back and thinks to himself, or says, "We know what we're doing. Let us just do all the work." The ones that do work are where the dealer principal or the owner of the business work with us, work harder than they've ever worked before, and then find themselves in a much better situation 6 months down the line. So yes, to answer your question directly, the motor industry certainly is a candidate for business turnaround, and we've had good successes before in this industry.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks a lot for that. Richard, if I could bring you back in here as Head of Innovation for FleetElite. I'd assume your role would be sort of to pivot away from a traditional way of doing things all this time to the Corona COVID-19 environment, where you've got to change things and you've got to look to be innovative as a business. Discuss a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's such a paradigm shift in just the market dynamics. And I think a lot of businesses that were experiencing pressure, if you look specifically at the automotive industry and eroding margins, really have to question, where do they sit within the value chain? What is the value? We see this specifically in the automotive industry, which I can talk to, a complete reshuffling, where that channel partner business model is kind of getting crushed in a lot of ways. There's your OEMs, your financial institutions now have the ability to be able to go direct. We've seen it with BMW and Mercedes-Benz. So it's a question, there's some very hard, soul searching as a business owner that you have to do. But my advice is always to look at the customer, to look at the problem, and to be able to find a problem that is felt severely, that there's, commercial consequences. I think you have to start there as a business, and you can only look at the customer and look at the problem and look at it within the context of, the various different macroeconomic forces that are pushing. Digitization is a huge one. A lot of these trends were already present. They've just, been really kind of it's actually scary how quickly they've happened. So I think my advice from an innovation perspective is really love the problem and love the customer. I think that then, if you have a very close eye and you use that as your North Star, I think you can reorganize your business, the capabilities that you might have, the resources that you might have in such a way that you can tackle a new problem that same customer is experiencing.
Great. Thanks, Richard. Warren, to you perhaps. Obviously, looking as a business development head at FleetElite, what kind of tips do you have for guys that are looking to develop business options going forward, particularly in this environment, in this COVID-19 environment?
If I just understand the question, are you referring to companies that are in distress, at what point they are in distress? Or?
Yeah, basically companies that are in distress.
Yes.
And would come into the COBRA sort of ecosystem, and how would you advise them on developing their business better?
Yeah, well, our mandate has always been for our clients is motor vehicles have a finite lifespan. So at some point they need to be disposed, and our mandate is obviously to fetch the highest price for that vehicle and to dispose of that vehicle in the shortest possible time. Now, with companies being in potentially being in a distressed situation where they haven't been earning income for the last 2 months, and perhaps cash flow bridging is an option. There may be like I touched on low-hanging fruit in your vehicle asset book, and in that situation, that's when I always refer to a company owner as looking at a dashboard of your motor vehicle. There's certain warning lights that come up on that dashboard, and if one of those warning lights is cash flow, you really need to start. That's the point where you really need to start looking at your options and not leave it for, like Ian said, going into or even having business rescue warning light flashing on your dashboard. That's when you need to work the hardest, and that's when you need to explore all your options. And I would say, if any company owner is watching his company dashboard, he would know, he'd have sleepless nights knowing that there's trouble coming. That's when you need to look at your options. And if you do have a fleet of vehicles in your company, there is an opportunity there. Speak with us. Let us highlight if there is real potential in these vehicles, or if they're just weighing you down. Can you do without them? Can we raise finance from them? Is it worth your effort, or do you need to look elsewhere? And and there's a lot of going into the situation, you can get into worse trouble. And our goal is to keep you out of that. And one of those ways is to actually access equity in your vehicles that you have currently without going to a third-party loan provider or a loan shark or anything like that. I'd say first look at your assets and speak to a company that specializes in vehicles, a company that specializes in properties or whatever the case is. We specialize in vehicles. So if you want to realize some cash flow from your vehicle fleet, then that's the right time to chat to us. Or, yeah, I think that perhaps answers the question for the subject of today.
Perfect. Warren, Richard, Mohammed, thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it. Guys, please join us at 3 p.m. This afternoon when Sifiso Skenjana of IQ Business unpacks the economic climate for the week. It's always a very interesting show. IQ Business are one of our partners in the big COBRA ecosystem. He's going to talk about economics, and it's always worthwhile on a Friday afternoon at 3 p.m. Listening to what Sifiso has to do. He's a great economist. He's been on many shows on the media, on television, on radio, in the print. He has his own column in Business Day, among other publications. So join him at 3 p.m. COBRA, of course, is a pro bono initiative. The leading partners are Schindler's, IQ Business, and Engaged Business Turnaround. But there are approximately 40 partners in the ecosystem. Go to our website, www.cobra.org.za, and you can see the whole ecosystem and all those involved. Thanks to FleetElite. We'll see you guys at 3 p.m. for an economic wrap. Cheers. Bye.
Thank you, Gary.